In the village of Nyamondo, heart of Mugirango constituency, a bouncing baby boy is born. For Milka and Samuel Onyancha, 1978, the year when Philip Onyancha was born, was a great blessing. However, in the year 2010, when the news about his gruesome acts broke, the blood-curdling acts where he killed 19 people left his family members in a shock and devastated. Hello, and thank you so much for joining me, and welcome to Murder Chronicles. I am a great fan of true and real-life crimes. If you too are a fan, then this is a place where to be. Consider hitting that subscribe button so that you may continue enjoying this kind of documentaries from me. Early childhood. Philip sat for his KCPE examination in the year 1994 and passed quite well. In 1995, Philip Onyancha was enrolled to Kenyatta Mahiga High School in Nyeri County. He had an admirable high school life, a very engaging student who enjoyed co-curriculum activities. He was once the games captain at school. He was enthusiastic about studies, and life seemed promising. However, things started falling apart in his second year in high school. His performance started to decline. He started bullying his junior fellow student. The bullying quite escalated to a point where he had received a suspension from school. The victimized student claimed later that Philip had sodomized him. There was no evidence to support such allegations, so the suspension was withdrawn and Philip Onyancha returned back to school after 2 weeks. A drastic change was noted about him even after resuming. He wasn't concentrating in class and the grades continued to decline. He also withdrew himself from all the other extracurricular activities in school. As time erupted, Onyancha shifted from being a calm and composed student to an individual who self-isolated from others, short-tempered and easily offended. After high school life, Philip found it necessary to join workforce immediately. He joined a security guards company, the G4S Kenya. It had been alleged that Onyancha had been banished from his home village due to attempted sexual assault. At this point, he's claiming that he could hear voices in his mind and they made him become bloodthirsty. He started getting the urge to kill people. It became quite compelling. While in Nyeri in the mid-2000s, that is when he met his beloved wife Lydia and they got married. Due to the nature of his work, Onyancha was moved to Nairobi where he lived in a one-bedroom house with his wife and their son and 2 other family members. This lifestyle felt quite disturbing for him. Sometimes later, Lydia started getting suspicious of her husband. She was suspecting him of having an extramarital affair, and also she hated the fact that he could hang out too late at night with other men. But somehow he always managed to calm her down and also convince her that he was not having an affair with another woman. Onyancha was antisocial with his neighbors, and somehow they described him as furious and erratic. They concluded that he was probably going through a lot of pressure due to his life situation of living with 2 more family members, or maybe he was suffering from some mental disorder due to a tumor that he had developed at the back of his head, the size of a tennis ball. But the truth of the matter is that Onyancha had unhealed childhood trauma. He had confirmed that he used to be sexually abused by a woman who was his nanny during early age, and such instances were likely to make him become the villain he had become. He had kept such pain to himself, which definitely had to become something toxic later in life. What people did not know is that Onyancha was a bloodthirst maniac who was in a mission to kill 100 people, which would help him become rich. He was in a mission, a deadly one. 18 people had already become victims.
Na sababu ambayo ilifanya victim wengi wakawa ni wanawake. Katika maisha yangu nikiwa mtoto, naweza sema kuna vile nilidhulumiwa na mlezi wangu ambaye alikuwa ni mwanamke. Nikaona hiyo picha potovu kuhusu jinsia. kimapenzi nikiwa mdogo.
Nairobi, 2008. A woman, 24 years old by the name of Christine Chelangat, goes missing. She is a mother of one and had gone to visit her relatives in Nairobi the last time she was seen alive. She is missing for 3 months now, but finally, the family members receive an anonymous call with people claiming to be her captors. Do you know what they want? They want 40,000 Kenyan money as ransom. Unfortunately, the family could not afford to pay it, and somehow the abductors lowered the amount to 15,000 Kenyan shillings, which they paid through a mobile money service in Kenya called M-Pesa. Sadly, they waited for days. Chelangat never returned, even years later. June 2009. Samuel Wanyonyi, a 9-year-old boy, is missing. He had just moved to Nairobi to live with an aunt 3 months before the disappearance. After he had gone missing for 3 days, his guardian, the aunt, receives a strange call demanding for a ransom. Previously, she had received a note from an anonymous sender. They demand 40,000 Kenyan shilling, which she has to send through M-Pesa. The call was threatening. Unfortunately, they could not afford the ransom. Later, they received a package with Samuel's belongings, including the clothes he was wearing when he disappeared. But somehow, the captors had reduced the ransom amount to 10,000 Kenyan shillings, but still, they could not afford to pay it. They had lost hope. They believed that Samuel was already dead. January 2010. Thika Town. People are being murdered mysteriously. A sex worker is murdered. She was Helen Nyambura. Her body is identified in a room at Rambogo Bar and Restaurant. Her dead body had been there for a while and police had concluded that Helen died out of a convulsive disorder. But she had been murdered by Onyancha, though he had not yet been caught. Horrifying enough is that Onyancha was among the shocked crowd, observing in disbelief as the police collect her body. He's roaming free and large. February 2010. Thika Town. Another sex worker is murdered, still in Thika Town. Her name is Jackie Wamboi, in a small motel called Suitable Lodge House. This event started giving the authorities sleepless moments. The killings were very random, yet now 8 people have already been murdered mysteriously. Shocking, right? And none of the cases is resolved. April 2010. Dagoretti. At this point, 40 days are almost over. The thief will be captured. This is the event that led to the arrest of Philip Onyancha. A small boy by the name of Anthony Moyori went missing. Weeks later, a letter would arrive at their home. The captors are demanding for a ransom if they want the boy to return safely. The family was able to pay the ransom. They paid the money via M-Pesa, and lucky enough, they had engaged the police in the process. The money is also being traced by the Safaricom money transfer and calls data records. They are tracing the numbers. Sad enough, 2 months passed and Anthony's body is found. He had been killed shortly after the abduction. Police confirmed that. June 5th, 2010. After deep and thorough investigations, Philip Onyancha is arrested. He is being connected to the murder of Anthony. He is the main suspect. He is the one that had written the ransom note that was delivered to the family. This is when Onyancha begins his confessions. He has killed 18 people so far, all women and children. Kenya was frozen. Fear struck throughout the regions. He was compared to Jack the Ripper, but fortunately, he never escaped. At this point, he is taking the police to different regions across the nation, showing them the spots where he was dumping bodies after killing them. Now, another person is incriminated in the process. Back in high school life, Onyancha confessed that he had been initiated to a cult by a female teacher back in high school. Her name was Elizabeth Wambui Kimani. He said that, though it was against the rule and the norms, she was obsessed with him. He would sneak at night, go to her house at the teacher's quarters, where they spent hours together. That is when she initiated him, and he too started to be obsessed with her. Something always compelled him to go to her room. Every night, he had lost track of his life then. Onyancha had been affirmed within the cult that if he managed to kill 100 people, he would become rich. Women were the most victims. This is because when he was a child, he had been sexually abused by a woman, so it was some sort of revenge. It had been alleged by many that Onyancha had been directed that he had to drink the blood of the victims right from their necks after killing them. However, he denied such claims years later. He also confessed to have two accomplices who were Tobias Aradi and Douglas Obiero. They were arrested immediately after his confession. He further said that he would kill every time he was moved to a new location by his employer. He took police to locations where he had killed victims from, including Nairobi, Central, Rift Valley, and other cheap lodges and accommodation rooms where he murdered sex workers from. At this moment, none of the cases have been resolved. Everyone was getting overwhelmed. Everyone is almost dumbstruck. 4 more bodies are found as he continues to lead the police, which included 2 bodies in Karen. On top of that, he led them to a private home where he worked as a security guard. There, he had murdered a woman and threw her body in an attic. She was just a random victim. At the Nairobi Water and Sewerage Building, he had dumped a woman's body there, near the Karen Shopping Center. He had dumped her in a sewer. Her name was Christine Chelangat.
Tumejaribu tumetafuta kila pahali, mortuary, wapi.
Hata wakati alikuwa na ripoti alikuwa anaambiwa hii hakuna acha, shauri ni mtu mkubwa, anaweza kuwa ameolewa.
After 3 months tukapata report ati mkitaka mtu wenyu mtumie pesa kwa Mpesa, na alikuwa anaitisha 30,000.
This is now the woman I mentioned at the beginning of the video. 2 years had passed by since her disappearance. He also confessed to the killing of the 2 victims mentioned earlier, Helen Nyambura and Jackie Wamboi. They were sex workers. At this time, vicious and uncontrollable mob is following him, wishing to get rid of him, but the police kept the crowd under control.
Hata kama ni mfupa tumeshukuru. Watu wao watosheki. Kwa kikwetu mtu apodei.
June 2010. Onyancha's former teacher surrenders herself to the authorities. She remained in custody for a few weeks. 24th of June 2010, she was taken to court, being charged with administering unlawful oaths. She denies the charges. She denied knowing Philip Onyancha, but detectives were able to associate her with being a teacher at Kenyatta Mahiga between the years 1995 and 1997. That was the time when Onyancha was enrolled as a student. Authorities continued to hold her back, and her trial was set on September 11, 2010. Onyancha was the person to testify against her, but surprisingly, Onyancha, during the testimony, he said that the allegations he had laid on his former teacher were fake. The principal magistrate nullified the allegations, saying that there was no proof beyond reasonable doubt that indeed the teacher had administered any unlawful oath. She was acquitted. But the case against Onyancha and his accomplices stood. They would go to trial. They were being faced with 18 murder cases, of which would be resolved independently. That means they would receive 18 sentences. On top of that, they were being faced with other charges such as kidnapping, sexual assault, and money fraud. Towards the end of 2010, Onyancha was first charged by a Kibera Raw Court on the account of attempted rape and assault on a woman in Nairobi. He received 12 years imprisonment at Kamiti Maximum Prison. 10 years was for attempted rape, 2 years for assault, which would run concurrently. Onyancha's mental health wasn't sidelined. His lawyer requested that he had some sort of mental illness and that a psychiatrist would offer such proof in the best way possible. He was examined by a panel of 3 doctors. They said that indeed he was mentally unwell and that he was a threat to the public. The report was not quite conclusive. On 1st and 8th of July 2011, an independent psychiatrist examined Philip Onyancha. He came up with a conclusive report indicating that he was suffering from a disorder called schizophrenia, a disorder that affects how people think, feel, and behave. In the year 2014, Onyancha would deny all the murder charges and ask for a plea. His accomplices too denied the killing of Anton Njiro Moirori. He also denied killing Jacqueline Chepngetich. 8 years later, on April 15, 2018, since Onyancha was arrested, the High Court stated that they had identified procedural errors to the case of Onyancha's serial killing, so it was hard to determine whether or not Philip Onyancha was guilty of murder. Some sort of disagreement arose among the members of the panel, stating that Onyancha was in fact a lunatic, but the doctors proved different. Despite his mental state, what he did was conscious. He used a certain smart scheme to lure and capture women and children and argued that he was fit to face trial. His prosecution should follow the Section 162 of the Criminal Procedure Code because Onyancha had a mental disorder. But he and his accomplices were tried under the Section 166 of the Criminal Procedure Code. However, Onyancha's case files were to be reviewed by the head of Criminal Division. The case would be heard afresh. When reports came back after the review, he was to be found guilty of murder, but he was concluded as an insane person. He was to be jailed at the pleasure of the president, which means being jailed indefinitely. July 2021. Justice Jessie Lesit comes to the picture. She rules that the prosecution failed to prove beyond reasonable doubt that Philip Onyancha was indeed guilty of murder and that he's the one that had murdered Jacqueline Chepngetich. Relying on circumstantial evidence and Onyancha's confession were not solid enough. The only evidence they provided was that the day Chepngetich was found dead in her apartment, Onyancha is the last person who was seen leaving the house. But since the victim was found dead, dangling from a rope, it was hard to determine if she was indeed murdered or she committed suicide herself or was strangled. However, pathology suggested that it was likely she was strangled due to the injuries around her neck. Also, it wasn't proven that indeed Onyancha is the one that killed her. Justice Lesit belittled the investigation team who looked into the case of Onyancha's murder. I quote her words: "Investigation into the murder of the deceased was wanting, and the witnesses kept contradicting themselves. They could not account whether they saw the accused at the apartment at the day of her killing." On top, she said that the team never included special forensic teams to determine whether the writing on Chepngetich's bathroom wall indeed belonged to Onyancha. She also wondered why a specialized team wasn't included to analyze the blood found on the deceased's door, which would have helped to reveal if she was indeed a victim or she killed herself. However, Lesit did not align with the medical report stating that Onyancha was insane. She concluded that he was a sane man whose mental state had been interfered with by his past life events. And I quote her: "He was found to have suffered trauma in the past and had narcissistic mental disorder whose characteristics include feeling of elevated sense of importance and self-validation. He was a person who had been frustrated by life and had great expectations." She concluded by saying that the lesson we learn is that every human deserves equal justice. Courts only gives verdicts, but God has the final judgment. He acquits, convicts, and avenges the victimized individuals and decides a fitting punishment for each case. Onyancha is still in prison, working as a library keeper at committee and also preaching the gospel. He's working hard towards transformation. He seems remorseful but redeemed. He keeps seeking for forgiveness from the people whose family members became his victims.
Inafika mahali nikianza kufikiria chenye nilifanya jana, najaribu kuifanya practically na fail. Sasa nashindwa nani yule alikuwa akifanya hivyo jana. Najaribu kulicall, lakini sasa haitendeki. I would like to apologize to all Kenyans for what I did, and especially the relative to the victims and all those people. I really was not in my real senses. I never knew what I was doing. I was in darkness. But now I'm glad I'm able to see what happened, and I can see the light now. I'm in the light.
His wife Lydia left her matrimonial home after an angry mob had attempted to burn their house down. Onyancha's family members are thankful to God that he landed into the hands of the law first, else the mob would have executed him ruthlessly.
Tungependelea ya kwamba asurubiwe kama vile anasurubia wengine.
Onyancha too had admitted that being in prison was safe because the cult members would have killed him for exposing them. He wrote a book, a story about his life and the gruesome acts he had committed. He wanted to inspire a Kenyan out there who thinks they are beyond redemption. It would reveal his entire truth. For Murder Chronicles, I am Sarah, and thank you so much for staying tuned in. And please do not forget to subscribe. Until next time, stay safe, and I'll see you soon.